What's up, y'all? So, Baldur's Gate is too good, apparently. Larian Studios, how dare you set expectations too high for other development studios? What's the deal? Why would you do that? Yeah, I want to check out Actman's video, what he has to say about it, as well as I want to show this this article.
Larian Studios has lit the internet on fire with their latest dating simulator, one that gives Super Seducer a run for its money. By all accounts, Baldur's Gate 3 is a slam dunk success, and it's now the highest rated PC game on Metacritic ever. There's a lot of games on PC. It has taken one of the top 10 spots for most.
Did it end up passing Hogwarts? Oh my god, it was so close. You gotta be kidding me. Oh, that's a shame. I guess the J.K. Rowling the hate train for that was just too strong. It got too much publicity to push Hogwarts forward.
Current players on Steam. On August 6th, apparently the game accounted for 28% of total player time on Steam.
It's crazy.
Pardon my French, but that's fucking crazy.
It's fucking
crazy. As far as I've played, Baldur's Gate 3 has been an incredible game, and it is very refreshing.
Squirrel might be the single most adorable creature you can recall in all your stunted memory.
Oh.
It would be ever so twee if it were climbing a tree.
Twee?
What the fuck?
Terrifying foes.
No studio is more deserving of this kind of praise than Larian, who has toiled in the mines for far too long. But we're not reviewing the game today. Instead, I want to focus on this small pocket of contrarians still holding out at Helm's Deep.
This is a great thread about why using a singular game to set expectations for everyone developing titles in the genre isn't useful, and is instead foolhardy. Like a lot of people, I'm deeply excited about what the lovely folks at Larian accomplished, Baldur's Gate 3, but I want to gently, preemptively push back against players taking that excitement and using it to apply criticism or raise standard to RPGs going forward. These are such brain-dead takes, like the game itself being good and isn't the expectations that people have. It is that the game is good. It's not the 174 hours of cutscenes. It's not the amount of time that they had in development or the amount of money that they had to spend. It's the fact that the game is good. These are the expectations that are being set. You do not have to have a game that looks this good. It can be stylized and just have a lot of depth and be really fun and not be buggy and annoying to play, and it be good. These are the expectations that Larian have set. Not the 180 hours of cutscenes, not the level of detail that they put into the game. It is the fact that the game is fun to play. The bugs are not very overbearing and putting people off, and it's just a solid, fun experience. And a lot of people it has a lot of depth, and people like that.
Out at Helm's Deep, I want to talk about this IGN video. Baldur's Gate 3 is causing some developers to panic, and the video it's pretty good. Wait, is this IGN? Are you sure? It's filled with great takes and actual insight and commentary into the game industry, and not just giving away 9 out of 10 scores to every new release.
Developers should be looking at what Baldur's Gate 3 did and trying to replicate where they can, not jumping up to defend games that are cramming in practices that fans are getting fed up with.
He's right!
But there's this sentiment going around that Baldur's Gate 3 is
true. Yeah, that is true.
It's just an unreasonable standard for AAA studios to meet. So we're gonna talk about that, because ladies and gentlemen, the companions in Baldur's Gate 3 are an irresistible thirst trap. Luckily for me, I can resist their temptations and quench my thirst with Air Up, the sponsor of today's video. Have you ever wanted to drink plain water but have it taste like flavored? Well, now you can. Air Up has a specially designed
Out of respect,
water bottle
I'm not going to
flavors
skip
water
his sponsor,
through scent alone.
but I will turn it down for a minute here. and just say that, yeah, I think the expectations really should be that Larian has made a good game, and that that's all people want, man. They're tired of Diablo 4 coming out with massive coding issues from a company that should for all intents and purposes be better than putting out a broken, unfinished game. But that's what they give us, and that's what like Square Enix gave us with Final Fantasy 15, and a bunch of other products. Not talking about Final Fantasy 16. But most of their other games come out like pretty bad, like Forspoken, which they dropped that development studio entirely. Avengers, which they dropped that development studio entirely as well. But yeah, people are just tired of broken, shitty games that are just not well written. They're not enjoyable. They don't taste well. They're not digestible.
Parts of the video game industry have gotten progressively greedier as time goes on. It's something that a lot of gamers are getting increasingly tired of. So naturally, as Baldur's Gate 3 was about to come out, we all wondered what the catch would be. Are there gonna be any dumb microtransactions?
No.
There are no in-game purchases in our game. We believe in providing a complete and immersive gaming experience without the need for additional purchases. Enjoy the game to its fullest without any additional costs or microtransactions.
I don't believe it!
This can't be right. Is this the prince who was promised? Well, the game's got to be fucking terrible then. What? We've gotten to a point where it feels like in the AAA gaming space, like outside of Nintendo, the idea of video games being complete at release and just a one-time purchase, that idea is almost extinct.
Yeah.
Even games that are just supposed to be single player can be completely broken at release. Well, with ethics like this, Larian, it's no wonder some game devs don't want it to become the new standard.
Or games that should be single player and require you to play online and like play on a server that when it shuts down, like you can't, then the game is gone. Like what happened to the good old days when you buy a game and then like, you dust that case off 20 years later and the console or whatever device you can play it on, and you plug it in and play it. It's frustrating that like those days are almost gone. And why like emulation ultimately is important. And if they don't want people to rely on emulation, they need to make the ability and preservability of their games way better.
Nah, just keep pounding those microtransactions in. Just keep shoveling that crap in there. You know what my first reaction is when a new game comes out? Where are the slot machines? How can I gamble more money? I think the industry deserves a game like Baldur's Gate 3, and we deserve a developer like Larian. The biggest problem with microtransactions and in-game purchases is that it always affects the core gameplay, usually in a negative way. Sometimes companies end up implementing anti-player design to then charge the players to make the game better, less tedious, or more customizable. Think about how Halo Infinite took away your ability to choose your own colors in order to sell that back to you. Like try to imagine Baldur's Gate 3 as a live service game with a battle pass. Jesus Christ. Okay, well now Larian has to figure out ways to provide continuous content, so they likely come up with easily copy and pasted content and quests for new seasons. How do players unlock tiers in the battle pass? How do you incentivize them to spend more money? What do you put in the battle pass to make it worth completing? On and on the questions go. You see, without a live service or a battle pass,
this is a really good point. Like all of the thought and effort that they put into designing that cycle, that process, is time and thought and development that they take away from designing the actual game. And this could very well, like battle passes could, while I'm not entirely against them, they could ultimately be ruining games. Microtransactions could be ruining games in that effect, which is tragic. Because like I'm a firm believer that like if something is purely cosmetic in game and people have the ability to afford that and buy that, then they should be able to buy that and flaunt their $100 fucking hat or pair of wings that has no stat value, no gameplay value whatsoever. I don't care. Like, that's great. Somebody has extra money to support the game, good for them. Not everybody does, and that's okay. Not everybody needs to spend that extra money. I'm a firm believer in games having that stuff, but they need to have people that are producing content specifically in that mindset, like, that are separate from the people that are producing the other content, so they're just all focused on the actual game being good and fun and enjoyable. And that way more people want to play the game and then consider looking at that stuff that's over there.
Larian doesn't have to mold and shape the game to fit that puzzle. All they had to do was focus on making the best video game possible, and I think they've done a bang-up job. And then the other thing with in-game purchases is you now have to take content out.
Larian had actual players, actual gamers playing their game for the better part of the 3 years early access and giving constant feedback about things that they liked or disliked. And that's great. I think more developers need to do this. Get the feedback of actual gamers and take it seriously.
Of the game that could have been unlocked by simply playing it, and you now have to resell it, right? Another thing that really makes Larian's games stand out as RPGs is that they don't really make filler or fluff. Quests aren't handled like a checklist of chores and activities to just keep you busy for no other reason. But let's go into this topic of Baldur's Gate 3 being so unbelievably good that nobody else can make a game this good ever. Please, please, please put some thought into it before you proclaim this is what AAA gaming should be moving forward. 6 years and 400 plus people with insane funding due to the IP having given BG3 a big boost. It's truly unrealistic to expect this on a regular basis. And then some guy from Larian came out of the woodwork and was like, big boost. It's truly
Please, please, please put some thought into it before you proclaim this. And AAA should be moving forward. 6 years, 400 plus people. Diablo 4 did like fucking 10 years with fucking 9,000 people. Some ridiculous fucking number. Maybe it was like 900. I don't know. Some ridiculous number of people. And the game is shit. It's dog shit. It's trash. Fuck you. People like this need to shut the fuck up and stop giving their input about games, because they're the reason games suck dicks, because they're shit eaters. You're a shit eater, Sean.
unrealistic to expect this on a regular basis. And then some guy from Larian came out of the woodwork and was like, what funding?
What funding? Well, they did have funding, but I'm going to talk about that later when I get into this article here, this Bloomberg article by Jason Schreier, which I believe I see a lot of his tweets on Twitter. He has some good insights every once in a while, I think, unless he's one of those guys that has bad insight. But the article's pretty good. So we're going to get into that after this. But they had some funding, but it's not like they had, like, huge investors. The investors was fans. It was people. It was crowdfunding. It was early access, founders packs and stuff. It was players. It was gamers that were playing the game, giving feedback. So again, it's like their funding was coupled with actual gamers playing their game and giving valuable feedback to make the game fucking good before it came out. Oh my God.
Just to be clear, Larian didn't receive funding from Wizards of the Coast to use the Dungeons and Dragons IP. Quite the opposite. They paid a licensing fee to use it. There are like standards and practices they have to follow with this IP. So it's even more encumbering than just making a new game based on an IP they already own. Which makes it...
The only advantage they had with that, it was that they have, as my friend pointed out, who like I said has been playing this game for 3 years, who's a massive D&D fan, is that Larian had an advantage in making this game because they are basically, the rules were already written for D&D years ago. So a lot of like creating the systems and the rules for how things should work was already made. They just had to, you know, code it into a game and make it flow well.
Even more impressive. Then he goes on to double down after being called out. Clearly funding wasn't the right choice of words here. Replace that with budget, knowing that an IP with the legacy of this one is going to sell.
What?
This just perplexes me.
Yeah, that's stupid because Baldur's Gate, Baldur's Gate is not a massive IP. Like, I've heard about it, but I've never played a single Baldur's Gate. And this is only the third one in how many years of gaming? Like I feel like I remember the first Baldur's Gate getting advertised in like Nintendo Power or early PC Gamer magazines or something, and like I just looking at it and I was just like, I don't really need to play that one. Doesn't look that interesting to me. But I don't know. It's not a massive IP though. I don't think. Maybe he's talking about D&D, but either way, it's a dumb take.
Are you talking about the Dungeons and Dragons IP? Because most people associate that with the tabletop board games. Are you talking about the Baldur's Gate IP? Because the last game I heard about Baldur's Gate was Dark Alliance 2 in 2004.
Fuck yeah. I love Actman. He's so smart, dude. Like, I'm so glad that he picked up on that same thing. This is a weird take.
People prior to this hadn't heard of Larian Studios and had never heard of Baldur's Gate before. What's also funny about this tweet and the situation in general is that people are proclaiming this isn't what AAA gaming should be. Yet another game recently came out that also had 6 years of development, a team 22 times bigger than Larian, with funding from a company that made $7.5 billion last year. And yet nobody is saying that game is creating an unrealistic standard. Why is that? Why is that?
It's creating a standard. It's creating a standard of piles of shit. Default bad.
Have the tools, the people, the means, and the funding, then you should strive for greatness. I don't understand why people think otherwise. You know, what are they actually thinking? Don't let this become the new standard because we can't make games that good. I think it's pretty clear what the difference in priorities is between like Larian and Blizzard. Blizzard is like trying to make money, and Larian knows they're gonna make money if they just make a good video game. When you're at that level,
and Blizzard is pocketing a lot of the money and profits and not putting that into development or hiring, competent, talented devs, whereas Larian put that money clearly into development and competent, talented devs.
You don't have to try to make money. Just make a good product. Like a lot of people, I'm deeply excited about what the lovely folks at Larian accomplished, but I want to preemptively push back against players taking that excitement and using it to apply criticism or a raised standard to RPGs going forward. Wouldn't it be great if Bethesda held this standard to Fallout 76? Wouldn't that have been great? What are you trying to say? Stop complaining about...
That's another company. Bethesda games always come out massively. They're always trash. And I would like to say that, like, hopefully Starfield is different. And I don't give a shit about 30 FPS. That, like, people are unnecessarily overcritical about 30 FPS shit because nobody's going to sit there and tell me that Bloodborne is bad. They might sit there and complain about the FPS, but no one's going to ever tell me that Bloodborne is a bad game. It is a fucking masterpiece. It's one of the best games ever. I don't care that it's 30 FPS. If a game's 30 FPS and smooth, it's great. But if it's 30 FPS and still drops and has like weird chugs and stuff, then it's fucking garbage, right? But ultimately, yeah, like 30 is tolerable if it's smooth and the game is enjoyable. But yeah, like Bethesda has a massive problem with their worlds being super glitchy and shit, and they are aspiring to create a large amount of worlds with Starfield, so best of luck to them.
AAA game developers that get away with releasing half-baked shitty games, just accept bad trends and shitty practices amongst the industry. Why wouldn't the best rated PC game of all time not raise the standards? This is not a new baseline for RPGs. This is an anomaly. Trying to do the same thing the same way, especially without the same advantages, could kill an entire group of studios.
What advantages? Again, any studio can make the choice to provide the game early access to players, collect feedback, have them playing it. You know, like that's the important thing. You can't have half-assed shitty developers that don't know what they're doing, that don't know what makes games fun or how to play them. Like the Diablo developers, they're not gamers. They may be developers that have an affinity for games and like gaming, but they're not gamers. We are different. You need to get your game in the hands of gamers and let them tear it apart and tear you apart and learn from those mistakes and create something strong.
What advantages? The advantage of talent, hard work, foresight, uncorrupted morals? These are things Larian has and all these other studios can easily attain. Baldur's Gate 3 is not an anomaly. It didn't just spring out of the ground. This isn't Larian's first game. They've been making top-down.
The inventory, so much about Baldur's Gate was so bad too. Like I said, my friend has been playing this game for years. I would now I live upstairs, but before I would come over, I would hang out, I would watch him play the game. Like, the inventory was a mess. There was unfinished cutscenes and parts of the game that you couldn't access because they were unfinished. And there was, like, all these bugs and glitches that they fixed. And it's just great to see, like, that developers out there actually care. And like, I always thought, like, in the past 3 years, wow, this is really cool that they're doing this, and this seems like a really good game. And now that it's coming out and it's getting, like, this massive praise, it's so good to see. Like, I'm getting I feel like a little emotional, like a little tear building up. Like, man, I can't believe it. They did it. You know, good for them.
RPGs for over 20 years. Baldur's Gate 3 is simply the culmination of all that work, of all they have learned, on an engine they've been working on for many, many years. Baldur's Gate 3 is the culmination of a series or genre in the same way that Elden Ring and Smash Bros. Ultimate were. These aren't anomalies. These are really good games made.
And keep that in mind, like, the engine, once you get a solid engine foundation down, like, that's the important thing. That's why From Software games are so good, because they keep building off of this same engine. And like, functionally, Diablo games were really good because they have this foundation of an engine that they get moving forward, and you would have thought it would be, no questions. Hey, they just import this same engine from Diablo 3, upscale some things, maybe port it over to a better engine, but fundamentally everything should work the same. But then when you get the game in your hands, like, not everything works the same. Not all the controls work the same. The controller schemes were different. The visuals, like the view distance is weird. Like, everything should have fundamentally been the same engine moving forward, and not have all of these various bugs and glitches that they have. But instead, they decide to build a whole new thing, and that wastes a lot of time and money. But companies that take their engine and move the same thing forward and add and subtract where they need to, ultimately make better games.
Made by competent studios with a clear vision that have worked tirelessly to perfect their craft. They are efficient and smart with their work, constantly building upon what they did last. Larian is super familiar with the engine used to make this game. The controls are the same as original Sin 2. So much of the base work was already done years prior. But
yeah, this is great, and I would like to see Larian make another game in this style, just because they can now. Now that they have an engine, just make another game, have it take half the time, or maybe even a fraction of the time that this game took, because they probably can. Now that they've learned so much from this game, they can probably make another game, and throw it out there. And I would like to see something like that happen. Like, more developers should consider putting multiple games out for, in a I'll call it a console cycle, rather than, all right, we made one, now let's start making for the PlayStation 6, whatever.
Unlike Divinity Original Sin 2, one of the craziest advances is that apparently all of the scenes have been mocapped. Whereas in Original Sin 2, you just had to imagine what characters were doing. Again, it's a pretty funny comparison because that's the same type of storytelling Diablo 4 is doing.
I don't even care about motion cap. Like, if the NPC stands there and just gives me a text pop-up, I honestly don't even care about that stuff. Because if the rest of the game is good, like, I don't give a shit about the NPC interactions. Like like it's good to like, you know, hey, see them standing there, you know their name, maybe they have some backstory and lore to them and stuff. But ultimately, like, no, I don't really need to see them outside of a cutscene doing that much. So motion capture doesn't really bother me. Stuff like that, they need to stop caring about shit like that, honestly. And overscaling graphics, like you can only go so far before you're looking at real life. I'm here to play a game, not real life. I don't give a shit if it looks real. I don't give a shit if it looks like a cartoon. Stylized is great. Again, it's all about the depth of the game, the story, the lore, the music, the ambience, you know? Like it's just you just want to get sucked into this world and get immersed in it and feel good and everything to be fun, having a lot of fun. That's the important thing.
And then you look at Baldur's Gate 3 and it's just like, wow. But if you think about it, conceptually speaking, the older Smash Bros. Characters' movesets are pretty solid. And most of them didn't need any massive overhauls when it came time to make Ultimate. But you get what I'm saying? These studios work smarter. They don't settle for re-releasing the same game every year or tearing down the foundation and rebuilding it every 3 years. So that's why these games seem so impressive. Because to a lot of people, they haven't played Larian games. They haven't experienced these mechanics before. So it feels like it comes out of nowhere. I can't disagree with this one more. Whenever a game disrupts the industry and delights players beyond expectations, it absolutely raises industry and genre standards regardless of the why and how. Well said. We should celebrate landmark titles like this.
Yeah.
Greed often breeds complacency, and once the profits start rolling in, you really see people's true nature. Do they want to do as little work as possible for the maximum amount of money? Do they still have the same passion? Does a guy with 1 million subs still have the same passion for his craft as a guy with 1,000? You know what I mean? Larian serves as a very good example to other developers, I would say. This is a great thread about why using a singular game to set expectations for everyone developing titles in a genre isn't useful and is instead foolhardy. This is one of those statements that like 5 years from now is going to be looked back on as really fucking stupid. It's going to be looked back on as those people when cars were first coming out. They were like, cars aren't going to replace horses. That's foolhardy. People that cling to the old ways when something objectively better comes along, right? You could probably say the same thing about Mario 64 when that came out and revolutionized 3D games and platformers. Right. I'm sure there was a bunch of people back then saying, well, Mario 64 is an anomaly. You can't expect other studios to be able to accomplish this. You can't apply this standard to other platformers. It's not fair.
That's not fair at all.
Here's the thing, right? Wouldn't a company or a person genuinely passionate about their craft want to compete with Baldur's Gate? Competition breeds improvement. It creates better products and we all win in the end. Complacency seems to be what some of these devs are advocating for, or at the very least admitting they work for a studio that doesn't prioritize making good products as much as they should. I get what they're trying to say though, right? Don't expect every quarterback to be as good as Tom Brady, but every quarterback should try to be as good as Tom Brady. I don't know a single game dev who has conveyed this sentiment about BG3. Instead, I've heard devs ask folks not to use the great things achieved by this team as a weapon to use against other devs. Now, this is the actual argument I think some of them are trying to present, right? Remember how obnoxious the PlayStation fanboys would get when they compared every video game ever made to The Last of Us 2? Yeah, nobody should be doing that with Baldur's Gate 3. The one or two devs...
Yeah, that's true. That is absolutely true. Like, you can't expect every game to, like I said, have 180 hours of cutscenes, but no one's expecting them to have 180 hours of cutscenes or the level of graphic fidelity that this game has. It's the level of care that they had, the level of care for the community and the amount of fun that they provide in the game experience.
They were quoting, we're talking about how you shouldn't be expecting every RPG studio to be making games on the scale of BG3 because not every studio has the time, effort, or manpower. Yes, but some studios do.
Again, it's not about that. Like, Vampire Survivors was initially made by one guy. It's so fun and it's so addicting and tons of people love it, and it picked up massively that the guy is now working with a development team and they put in all these new features. It has co-op now. It's friggin' crazy. So, like, no, like, people like this need to shut up. It's not about it's not about the graphical fidelity. It's not about 180 hours of cutscene. It's about a game being good and fun and providing a good experience that a lot of people want to enjoy and share with other people, so that they tell their friends, you got to try this game. It's so good. And whatever, like the rest will come after that. You make a good, fun game and it's successful and people enjoy it and it becomes profitable, then you can now spend more money. Now you have the money that you were complaining you didn't have to invest in development and stuff like that. And you don't have to look at just exclusively at Baldur's Gate 3. Look at games like Vampire Survivors.
Do have the time and manpower, they just don't put in the effort. Nobody is saying Johnny game developer and his 2 college dorm roommates should make a 100-hour masterpiece RPG as their first game.
Again, Ponkel, one fucking guy initially. Now there's a bunch of people working on it because the game was massively successful and profitable. But yeah, this video, I'm going to finish watching this off the thing here, because where am I at? I'm at 30 minutes already? Holy shit. That's plenty of time for this. I've already given plenty of feedback in addition, because I think we're doubling up, but we have a very similar mindset, and I'm kind of doubling up on some of the things he said, and no, it's not pre-watched. I think that it's just, Actman has a lot of common sense. And common sense goes a long way. People like him, people like Asmongold. This is why they are so popular and successful, and they have great opinions, because it's just common sense. That's all it is. And the game industry seems to be lacking it, or lacking people with it, or care to utilize it. But Larian Studios clearly has a ton of common sense, because look what they've achieved. So before I end the video, I do just want to go and take a look at this article. I'm going to link both Actman's video and this article at the end, so you all can check it out. Yeah, so much to fan surprise and delight, the video game company Larian Studios recently announced the upcoming role-playing game. Well, it is kind of a role-coming game, apparently. Baldur's Gate 3 will make its debut for 4 weeks earlier than expected. For an industry that frequently delays products and rarely beats deadlines, it was an abnormal move. But then again, little about Baldur's Gate 3. Out Thursday as normal. Its scope, 174 hours of cutscenes, 17,000 possible ending variations, according to the developers. It's unprecedented. The 6 years it took to create the game. And again, when you hear numbers like that, 174 hours of cutscenes, 17,000 hours of possible ending variations, consider that you could have different people in your party standing around in the background and stuff like that. Those are going to be considered different variations. And that'll also, like, different scenes that are treated in different ways. Maybe the same scene between a dwarf main character and Shadowheart compared to a normal-sized human main character and Shadowheart. That might be considered part of the 174 hours of cutscenes and stuff like that. So these numbers, they sound grandiose and unreasonable, but you have to keep in mind stuff like that. The party could consist of different people and just have different elements within the same scene, and add to that number, and stuff like that. And going down further, blah, 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 where was it here? There was another thing that I wanted to point out. I should have highlighted it going into here. But it talks about here. The ambitious scope of Baldur's Gate 3 was made possible by another unusual move. In October 2020, Larian put the game into early access mode, allowing players to buy and play through an unfinished version of its first act. More than 2.5 million people went on to purchase the game, which allowed it to stay financially viable even as the scope expanded and the development dragged on, whereas most big-budget video games shy away from such moves because it can set bad first expectation and muddle the final release. The decision worked for Baldur's Gate 3. You see what I'm saying? This was the point that I was trying to make. My friend has been playing this game for 3 years. These in a Discord with people that have been playing the game for 3 years, providing feedback to Larian for 3 years, that they have been fixing the game, preparing the game for this launch, and I'm just so happy to see that this paid off for them in a big way. And these are the expectations that developers should have. It doesn't matter if you're one guy or 1,000 guys. Like, get proper feedback for your game before you put it out. Don't put out an unfinished piece of trash. Give it the care that it deserves. And people talk about funding, unfair funding. Just do the math. $60 multiplied 2.5 million times. That's a whole fuckload of funding. That came from fans, from people. And there's a lot of like people criticize a lot of projects that do like crowdfunding and Kickstarters. They don't all have to be bad. Like Ashes of Creation is another one that I get like kind of unfair feedback. Like, let the game come out first before you rip on them for stealing people's money in a Kickstarter, you know? Because the game could come out and absolutely shatter expectations and just be amazing. So, again, I'm going to link this article and I'm going to link Actman's video. Actman, great video as always. Go watch him. Like and subscribe, comment on his video, like, subscribe, comment on mine as well. Actually, you don't have to like or comment on mine, but a subscription would really help me out. But yeah, that's it. Peace.